Chrétien's solution, firing Eggleton, and then, in a shocking Sunday evening cabinet shuffle...
Well, of all the changes made by Prime Minister Chrétien yesterday, the one you need to pay the most attention to is this guy. He is the man who now leads our armed forces. And his resume...
In the first couple of months or so, there was no request from the military for any more action in Afghanistan, and I had not made up my mind because I was just learning the ropes.
Soldiers stationed in Afghanistan are coming home in late July or early August, and they aren't going to be replaced.
I think they were concerned that the Army had become overstretched and the Army needed a break, and they really weren't, at that time, looking for new things to do.
More than 30,000 people lined the streets of Edmonton today to welcome home our troops from Afghanistan.
Now, it didn't take very long, maybe a couple of months, before they came to me and talked about renewing the Kandahar mission.
After the first month, we started hearing views coming from the military side of the department that we should consider another deployment into Kandahar in 2003. And it was suggested that this was highly valued by the Americans and that we would be getting a formal request from them at some point for that kind of a deployment.
The Canadian forces prefer to work with American forces. There's a lot of interaction at the most senior level. So what you would expect to hear was a recommendation that the Canadian forces work more closely with the American forces.
The Chief of Defence Staff, Ray Hanault, also argued that under no circumstances should Canada agree to be part of Europe's International Security Assistance Force, ISAF for short. The uniforms in the South Tower argued the mission in Kabul was too dangerous, that it would become a quagmire. And besides, the world's attention had suddenly shifted to Iraq.
Well, it isn't news that the Americans want our people to go to Iraq. Everybody knew that. The more interesting point is they were telling me that they wanted to go to Iraq. They wanted to show to the Americans, to the world, to Canadians, that they were also strong warriors. My staff, Jean Lang, was approached by the U.S. military attaché and said that Rumsfeld would really like it if I could go and see him.
It was quite an extraordinary meeting because we had been under the impression that the Americans wanted to talk to us principally about their thinking on Iraq.
And the minute we got into the meeting, he described a country in terms that could only be Canada, but without saying the name Canada, and said this was the country that we really needed to have commanding ISAF in Kabul. And I was quite taken aback because I was expecting pressure on Iraq. And then I said to him, well, you know, if we go to Kabul, we won't have any soldiers left for Iraq. And he said, well, that's okay, I know. So that certainly gave me a lot of ammunition to push with the government to go to ISAF.
Hey, sir, there's fucking locals walking right into the cordon here.
If you're the leader of the village, then you obviously must know who's coming in and out of your village. So you know exactly where the murder happened, and you should know exactly who did it. You know who doesn't belong in your village, and you know who does. So I can ask you again, who are the ones who did this?
Quick question, in regards to what you were doing here with that gentleman earlier, what's the purpose of what you're trying to do to this village?
What we want to do with this village basically is create a good rapport so that basically want to interact with the villagers and have them come to us with information that could possibly lead to any sort of weapons caches, Taliban activity, Taliban locations, that sort of stuff. We know that. It's important for them to see us, and our mere presence in this area is actually going to disrupt a lot of what the Taliban is trying to do and create.
Do you suspect right now that there are Taliban in this village?
In my personal opinion, yes, I would say so. Matter of fact, I would say that most of the places we go to, they are there. So we could potentially be talking to a lot of guys who, in a few days from now, will be taking up arms against us.
Finished objective 1?
Yeah. I went to Roger. We finished objective 1 now. We're going to carry on with objective 2 now. 1 to out. Okay, Andy, you can handle these?
We wish we could tell you whether Canada will be part of whatever military action is taken against Iraq. The Americans are officially asking that question tonight.
5 weeks ago, the U.S. sent Canada a note asking what contributions we might make to a war effort. Now, you would expect that to top the agenda when Defense Minister
spelling out Canada's official position on war against Iraq.
The Canadian position is that, on matters of peace and security, the international community must speak and act through the UN Security Council.
I understood in my discussions that the concentration was to be in Afghanistan. Suddenly, the emphasis became Iraq.
Dr. Blix will report again, and if the Security Council approved the beginning of the war...
On March 17, 2003, officials in London sent an urgent request to Ottawa on behalf of Washington for a final answer on whether Canada would participate in the Iraq invasion.
It was a kind of a surprise because the call came at the military level. We need an answer by noon. I said, if they want the answer by noon, of course they will have it.
If military action proceeds without a new resolution of the Security Council, Canada will not participate.
There was anger in Washington, D.C. that the Canadians decided not to support the war in Iraq.
My guess is that Cellucci was listening too much to the military hawks and not enough to the people around Jean Chrétien.
With Canada's rejection of the Iraq invasion put to rest, the uniforms in the South Tower turned to the major military task at hand, making the commitment to Afghanistan and ISAF a reality.
The problem is we didn't have enough boots on the ground. We didn't have enough soldiers. And the countries of NATO were not willing to cough up enough soldiers for a conventional effort. So the concept of provincial reconstruction team was born. Partly reconstruction, partly humanitarian aid, and partly military defense if the Taliban were to attack.
We saw making a commitment to a provincial reconstruction team at the end of our one-year lead assignment in ISAF as a way of gracefully getting out of that commitment.
What no one realized at the time was that far from being an exit strategy out of Afghanistan, the provincial reconstruction team would lead Canadian forces deeper and deeper into the most dangerous part of the country, a path that would cost many more Canadian lives, as is revealed next.